Corby Lucas, and I'm the athletic director at Harding Academy in Nashville, Tennessee. I want to welcome you to our workshop this morning on heat acclimatization and heat illness prevention. At this time, if you could please take a moment to silence your cell phone, we would greatly appreciate that. If you are anything like me, your cups have probably been filled to overflowing over the course of the past couple of days, so we certainly appreciate you being here this morning. It goes without saying that Dr. Bergeron is an expert in his field. He is the executive director of the National Youth Sports Health and Safety Institute. He is internationally recognized for his research in exercise heat stress and youth athletic health. Dr. Bergeron is currently serving on the NFHS Sports Medicine Committee. Exertional heat stroke is the leading cause of preventable death in youth sports. Today, Dr. Bergeron will examine a number of risk reduction strategies, such as acclimatization status, activity modification, uniform and protective equipment configurations, and scheduling of practice training and play. He will explain that close monitoring of youth athletes and a prompt response to signs of evolving exertional heat illness are critical priorities for all who are involved with youth participating in sports in the heat. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Bergeron.
As a prop, I'm going to get hydrated before I start. Hydration's important, I heard somebody say once. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. And thank all of you for coming. I know that there are a lot of conflicts and other things that you could be attending. It's the end of your conference or toward the end, and there's probably a mindset of trying to check out. This is an extremely important issue, and maybe many of you said, well, what else can you say? We've heard about this, you've been talking about this, we've read things. You know, it's so important that it really is essential to keep getting reminded about the issue and why it's important and what you can do about it. You'll notice on the title here, it says safety and performance. Without question, I hope everybody really embraces that the safety is the priority. But what you need to realize that, and I say this all the time, especially to groups like this and coaches, and athletes too, but particularly coaches, that when you are enhancing safety, if you keep your athletes safe, you are actually giving them an opportunity to perform at their best. So they're not disconnected, they're not distinct. And I can't emphasize this enough, that by enhancing safety, you are indeed enhancing performance. And that's something that, you know, really needs to be emphasized to all of your coaches. Because I hear all the time, you know, people say, yeah, I get that, but we have a game. But, there's always that but. I said, but it doesn't have to be that. They go hand in hand. So keep your athletes safe. You will help them to perform better. The issue has been re-emphasized by the High School Federation. This isn't a new issue for NFHS to make a big deal of, but it's been re-energized in the last couple of years. And a couple of things that I want to point out. You have handouts that you should have picked up in the back there. There's been two position statements that have come out as part of this strategy to re-emphasize this very, very important critical issue. And the one on the left is the heat acclimatization, heat illness prevention position statement. Again, that is something that we're going to be kind of walking through the key features of that today. And the other position statement is on hydration, which is integral to everything that we're going to say on the previous one. So these two position statements were part of this new re-energized, re-emphasized strategy to make it much more apparent, kind of in your face, that this is important and this is what you have to do. The position statements are really, you know, written in such a focus level, but also a high enough level so that it's not mandating exactly how you do things. What it is recognizing that each one of you schools and communities and such, have different needs, different facilities, different demands because of what's available, but also because of the environment and the season and all of that. So there's a lot of fluctuation on how exactly things need to be done. But in these position statements, we are emphasizing the fundamentals that really are based more on human physiology and not facilities and not availability or not even climate per se. But these things are considerations that must be addressed wherever you are relative to the individual and any young athlete's physiology in response to circumstances. Okay, so again, there's a lot of room for latitude, and there's a lot of room for you adjusting what exactly you're doing and how, but you can't ignore the human body's physiology. That's not going to change no matter where you are. Okay, so why these guidelines? Why are we putting such an emphasis on this? And what is it about this that warrants me coming in here and again emphasizing this to all of you? You know, we still, up until a couple of years ago, we don't know if it's because of everything the High School Federation's done, but maybe that's a nice thing, but we have to be cautious. Up until, you know, a couple of years ago, there has been always several or more exertional heat illness related deaths on the high school athletic field. And it's not just football, but primarily that's where it is. And there's a whole lot of ongoing problems related to exertional heat illness. And this usually happens on the first day or first few days of preseason practice. So there's something going on there. If you look at all the cases, it's usually day one. And sometimes day one or two or a little bit later, but not too much further beyond that. Why is it on day one or two? For simply just what it says here. Going too hard, too fast, too soon, maybe too much uniform on. There's sort of a sense of urgency from coaches that, okay, we got to go. We only have 2 weeks, and we're going to go hard. And so you just look at all those circumstances of when somebody has died or had a serious problem on the field, it's because of this. They just inappropriately went too hard. So that needs to be addressed. As was mentioned in the introduction, what we're really trying to avert is exertional heat stroke, but really everything be short of that too. It is indeed the leading cause of preventable death in high school athletics. Preventable death. I can look at probably every one of the exertional heat stroke deaths that have happened in high school. And I would say, if not all, darn close to all were preventable had the guidelines that we're outlining here today been followed, which is obviously tragic. What you see below that, 40 high school football deaths between these years, and as I said, there hasn't been any related to heat directly in the last couple of years. That's a good thing. What we don't know is the bottom bullet, because the Centers for Disease Control had put out in their morbidity and mortality weekly report what I thought was very good, because the deaths are tragic, and that's one way to look at how serious this is and how widespread this is. But the CDC outlined a couple of years ago for the first time how many kids are in the emergency department who live from exertional heat stroke. So they're this close, but they survive, thank goodness. And it's in the thousands. And anyone who knows about survey data, however you get it, if they're capturing thousands, it's probably more than that. Some are missed. I know in the past when I was in Georgia, I just remember one Friday night, there were 6 kids with exertional heat stroke from high school football in our emergency department alone. So again, thousands is probably an underestimate of what's happening. We don't know. I said there's no deaths in the last 2 years, but we don't know if what else is still going or not. Now, most of these emergency department encounters or records are from boys 15 to 18, and most of them, more than half, are related to football. But it's not just football, other sports too. But it seems to be in this age range of 15 to 18, primarily boys. So that in itself is alarming. Before we get too much further, I just want to re-emphasize, what happens in the heat and why it is such a challenge to every youth athlete that exposes him or herself to strenuous conditions or heat stressful conditions. Certainly, as you just stand in the heat and as you begin to exercise, body temperature goes up. You begin to sweat more, we know that. We'll talk about what those sweat losses can be. They can be extraordinary. Interestingly, as your body heats up and as you exercise more in the heat, your body shifts from burning fat primarily to burning carbohydrate, which is one of the reasons that as you exercise harder and longer and in hotter conditions, you fatigue earlier. And part of it's related to dehydration, part of it is related to an enhanced use of carbohydrate. And so, as you go longer in the heat, whether it's a sport drink or some kind of other exogenous food intake, the need for carbohydrate increases dramatically. So fatigue, time to fatigue is shorter, performance certainly goes down, and there's a variety of clinical risks as shown here. It could be as simple, not benign completely, but exertional heat cramps, heat exhaustion. Heat exhaustion is really the body's fail-safe maneuver. If you're getting to the point where you're getting so dehydrated and energy depleted, the body will collapse. And that oftentimes saves people from getting further along to exertional heat stroke. So heat exhaustion is a problem, but if it happens, it's probably a good thing because that person might have continued, or had it been able to continue, might have gotten into a worse situation. It needs to be addressed promptly, but it's not as risky as exertional heat stroke, and that certainly can lead to collapse or death. Exertional heat stroke is a medical emergency. You've heard all that, and it's just really, really critical that it's managed promptly. So we're going to talk about these fundamentals, and these fundamentals are outlined in the handouts that you got in the position statement. And these are fundamentals for the reasons I mentioned at the very beginning. These are fundamental to safety, and they are fundamental to performance. Okay, so keep that in mind. And there's no wiggle room in this. I mean, you can't say, okay, I'll take, of the 7 fundamentals, I'll take 4, and I'll ignore the others. These are fundamentals to safety and performance. So this is one of the primary fundamentals that I think, as we said in the beginning, most of these exertional heat stroke deaths happen on day 1, 2, or 3 because of not attending to this fundamental. And that is that anytime you are introducing new exercise, new uniform configuration, new activities, and a new environment, there's a process of getting used to that, or what we call acclimatization. The body cannot instantaneously adapt and tolerate a new set of circumstances immediately. So there needs to be an adjustment period. And that adjustment period is mental, it's physical, it's physiological, it's all of that. If you ignore that adaptation period, then you're putting the athletes at greater risk. And greater risk of bad performance, but greater risk of safety issues too. Now you might say, well, why are we talking about acclimatization, let's say in late August, even sometimes July? These kids should have been outside and used to the environment. Probably not. These days you don't have people spending as much time outside exercising and working. There's a lot of indoor activity and air conditioning and all that. But even if an athlete is outside and exposed to an environment, if you are bringing up the level of conditioning or exercise activity to a much higher level, and certainly adding a uniform on top of that or protective equipment, the person is not acclimated to that. And so that's a new adjustment period. So it's really critical that you spend more time with instruction and allowing for that adaptation period than really working them hard right from the get-go. Again, if we get past the first few days, then things are a whole lot better. The other perspective to keep in mind, that even from a fitness perspective, any human being does not get more fit quickly. Changes in fitness, measurable changes in fitness and conditioning takes a long time. So if you have athletes who are not fit to your expectations coming into preseason, no matter what time of year it is, those athletes are not going to be more fit in a week or 2 or 3. Not measurably. Fitness changes take time. Now you can get somebody fatigued, you can hurt somebody really quick, but you cannot accelerate fitness, just like you can't accelerate in a healthy way weight loss. If you have a dramatic weight loss quickly, it's mostly water, we all know that, and it becomes dangerous. Well, if you try to accelerate the changes in fitness process and have a sense of urgency about it, then risk of injury increases dramatically. So not only do you have to get acclimated to the environment, the activities, the uniform, but you also have to recognize that fitness changes are going to take months. Measurable fitness changes are going to take a long time. So don't try to accelerate that. Acclimatization to the heat, though, a number of things happen, and I'll just show a bunch of them here. These are not all, but these are the primary adaptations that the body changes through a process of a week or 2 weeks or maybe a little longer of getting used to exercising in hot and or humid conditions. The exercise feels easier, the heart rate goes down, there's an increase in blood volume, a host of different things. I won't go through all this. Body core temperature for a given level of activity goes down, so it's safer. People tend to sweat more, they tend to sweat earlier. That might see as a problem. Gee, they might dehydrate more readily, that's true. But actually sweating more is a good thing because that shows the body's regulating temperature. And a host of other things. So the capacity to tolerate the conditions through a number of physiological adaptations is dramatically different when you start versus a week or two later. So recognize that if there's a 2-week pre-season period and there's a new environment, that you are working toward that endpoint, not only acclimation to the activities, but acclimation to the environment. And by the time you get your athletes to the end of that, then they're probably acclimated appropriately and sufficiently to the heat. Trust me, they are not acclimated at the beginning. And that's where the risk is. That's where the greatest risk is. So fundamental 2 is really built around the individual. And Bob's heard me say a number of times, both Bobs have heard me say a number of times, that I've had the unfortunate experience of being involved in as an expert witness on a number of these exertional heat stroke deaths. And when you look at it, I said, if not all, darn near all of these are preventable. And when you really look at the testimony and the depositions and the medical records, oftentimes the individual wasn't totally healthy. And so, as a coach, as any athletic director over a number of coaches, if somebody is ill or recently was ill, that person is at much greater risk for having a problem. That needs to be acknowledged, that needs to be accommodated for. You can't say, hey, suck it up, especially if that illness involved, any kind of major fluid loss, GI distress, vomiting, diarrhea, and especially if it had involved fever, because a fever means that there's a dysregulation in the brain's ability to regulate body temperature. So if there's currently a fever, or had there been one recently, then that person's capacity to appropriately regulate temperature in the heat is compromised. So that's a biggie. And you need to have your athletes report that. You need to be aware of who's been recently ill. And certain medications. A lot of kids are on Ritalin and things like that accelerate the body's metabolism. That medication in itself, or any kind of medication that maybe is trying to address blood pressure and there's loss of fluid, and a number of other medications too, can interfere with the body's adaptation and tolerance to exercise in the heat. And so there needs to be an awareness and probably an accommodation in some cases, or at least to monitor those athletes more closely. So this is really about the individual. And again, it's not just outdoor football, it's really any sport where you're exerting yourself strenuously. Any kind of recent illness, current illness, or medication is reason to either not be involved or to reduce that activity tremendously. This is, I guess I always smile about this because it seems so obvious. If it's hotter out, you got to do less, or you got to work less hard. We did a survey, meaning myself and some other investigators, surveyed across the nation. I think it was over 500 high schools. We we assessed and just did an online survey to the athletic trainers or to coaches about, okay, what do you know, just a number of different things, but specific to this, what do you do when it's hot? You know, what adjustments do you make to preseason practice? And it was, I appreciate the honesty, the candor, but it was alarming that a number of responses from coaches were, we have a plan and we stick to it. We don't have time to not do this. And so whether it's hot, whether it's cool, whatever, we're doing this because that's the plan that I drafted up over the summer. Okay? You have to recognize that everything we've been saying, the tolerance to the heat, to the activity, is decreased measurably. We all know that. You work out in the heat, it's harder. We have to acknowledge that. Risk of exertional heat illness goes up dramatically. Have to adjust practice. Now, you can monitor the environment. People ask all the time, okay, at what level do you do what? We're going to get into a number of contributing risk factors later, but there's no easy answer to that because it depends on so many things. But you have to have a general sense. There's no magic threshold that if this, then that, or if this, don't do this. You know, people can tolerate a lot if the activity is appropriately adjusted. Not to say that there's no risk, but you can accomplish a lot if you do it smartly. So some kind of awareness that, okay, it is hotter, it is more humid, and you can't just depend on the airport, you know, the TV, what they said in the morning. You have to do it on site because a lot of things are different on site versus maybe 10, 15 miles away or more at an airport. So adjust things, and then as the environment gets more stressful, pay attention. Monitor the players more. There's a direct parallel to stressful environment and the level of awareness that you should have, all coaches, all staff, and each player should have as that environment goes up. It just, you know, again, the bottom bullet there boils down to pay attention. Because again, and when you look at these depositions, people missed. You know, they weren't paying attention to the degree that was needed. All right, everybody knows, everybody admits that they know that hydration is essential to heat safety. And you should know that it's essential to performance as well. And I agree with that. It's integral to safety in the heat. What you need to know, though, is that that is not the only solution, and that does not mitigate all risk. Countless times I've spoken to audiences and said, oh, but they're well hydrated. We've got the hydration down. I said, okay, that's good. But I have the ability to test athletes at either outdoors or in an environmental chamber. And I can tell you that I can show, and I've seen young athletes, older adolescents, even though I know, and we've measured it, they're fully hydrated. If I increase the intensity of activity in a stressful environment, within 2 minutes, sometimes even less, I can see body temperature go up dramatically, knowing that this person is well hydrated. The biggest determinants of a person's body temperature increasing is the environment combined with the intensity of activity, whether you're hydrated well or not. Okay, now if you're really dehydrated, that's going to happen faster. But you can still kill somebody working that person hard enough in stressful conditions, or not even that stressful conditions, even in the face of being well hydrated. So I'm making a big, big deal of this because it is a big deal. That having hydration, watching your athletes drink, doesn't mean that they're not at risk. Okay? It helps, but it's not the whole answer. Now, when we talk about hydration, this is always something too, is that athletes and coaches and parents don't fully appreciate how much fluid their son or daughter is capable of losing. And unless you've actually measured it on yourself or seen measured with other people, it's often alarming how bad this can be. And fluid losses can be extraordinary. These are sort of loosely defined sweating rates in liters and ounces. that I've seen over the years with kids, anywhere from 13 years old up to 18 years old. So you can get, depending on the person, depending on the activity, depending on the environment, anywhere from, half a liter to over 3 liters an hour. And a 3-liter sweating rate is not that uncommon for a high school boy in a variety of sports. And somebody that maybe even only weighs 150 pounds. I've seen sweating rates like this. Now, the highest sweating rate I've ever seen on a guy was 4.3 liters. He was an adult. 4.3 liters per hour, he said. Per hour. That's way over a gallon of sweat per hour. Just as a funny story, and it wasn't this guy. The guy that I'm about to mention was 4.1 liters per hour, so it wasn't as dramatic. But we had an athlete come to our lab, referred from Minneapolis, and he was a runner, and he had exertional heat stroke twice. And his physician wanted to know if he was intolerant to the heat. And so we did a test that was actually developed by the Israeli army to see if a body temperature can be regulated in tough conditions. So the heat tolerance test, he did just fine. But we're noticing, and the heat tolerance test is only a walking protocol, but it's in 104 degrees. But we're noticing, gee, this guy's sweating a lot. And so we then later in the day put him at his race pace in cool environment. Now, I said the heat tolerance test is 104 degrees. Then we put him in 74 degrees, kind of like this room right here. And we had him run at his race pace. He's a good athlete. So what I said before was the biggest driver is intensity of exercise, right? At race pace in this environment, he lost 4.1 liters of sweat in 1 hour. And it wasn't even hot, because of the intensity of the exercise. He finished that, and I said, all right, he got exertional heat stroke, something funny, in half marathons. And I told him, I said, new distance for you, 10K is your limit. You cannot tolerate that much fluid loss, and I certainly don't expect you to drink that much while you're running at that level in a half marathon. So you physiologically can't really safely go more than a 10K. And I thought he was going to be really upset. And he goes, oh, that's great. And I said, what? He goes, well, I don't want to run these things. My wife's the marathoner. She's got me doing these things. And I said, oh, have you checked your life insurance policy? Maybe. But anyway, so now he has a note from the doctor, right? That he doesn't have to do half marathons. So anyway, so sweating rates can be extraordinary, and these are dramatic. Now, during activity, the tolerant intake level is much shorter than that. And people generally drink comfortably about half of what they sweat per hour. So you can see if you have a sweating rate of 3.5 liters an hour, even 2.5 liters an hour. By the way, the highest sweating rate I ever measured in a woman was 2.6 liters in an hour, which is a very, very high sweating rate for a woman. They generally tend to be less, but not always. So you generally drink about half of what you lose comfortably. So you can see if you're drinking 1 liter an hour and you're sweating 2, then at the end of a 4-hour workout, you've got a 4-liter deficit. It's over a gallon of fluid down from one long workout. And so this is where people don't realize how much fluid they really lose. So when you work with the athlete and you say, okay, you lost this, and they say, yeah, but I drank throughout. I said, yeah, but you only drank half of what you lost, and then you line up the bottle and say, this is what you need to consume, which is actually more than the remaining deficit because your body still produces urine and sweats a little bit more. It's actually this much to recover from that one workout. And they go crazy. They say, wow, I can't drink that much. I said, not all at once, but before you work out tomorrow, you need to. Otherwise, you're starting tomorrow at a deficit. And so, again, these numbers are usually impressive and surprising to athletes and coaches and such, that they don't realize that it's that high. And it's not always that high. And we have the band up there because, they are out there a long time too in the heat, and sometimes later in the season with heavy uniforms on. And a lot of band members have gone down with heat exhaustion from huge fluid deficits. So it can really be across sports. Why does it make a difference? I won't spend too much time on this, but what you're looking at here, these lines with the triangles on top, is heart rate at different levels of dehydration. And 1 or 2% from a normally hydrated condition, that's very common. Probably every one of you here is probably in that level right now. And it's very, very common for an athlete to be 3, 4, 5% down, especially with repeated workouts. What you're seeing, though, that going from 1% to a little over 2%, there's a dramatic change in not only heart rate, but body temperature, going from here to here, here to here. So just going this distance, or this difference, makes that exercise feel a whole lot harder. And body temperature will go up dramatically. So look at the difference, though, when you get here. And I see a lot of adolescent athletes operating in this level here all the time. And so the difference of your body temperature and your heart rate here versus here is huge. And so that exercise will feel a lot harder, and it will put that person at much greater risk. Fundamental 5. I said before, pay attention. I'm going to say it again, pay attention. Because, again, it's so disturbing when you read these depositions of these deaths, and you hear the other teammates say, well, he didn't look quite right. He wasn't himself. He started talking funny. You hear things like that, and you say, well, why wasn't somebody reporting that? And there's not a clear desire from coaches to get that information. And as coaches, athletic directors, it needs to be emphasized that the athletes, the other athletes, are probably the first line of defense, and probably are going to be the first people to recognize that so-and-so isn't quite right. Because a coach has a lot of people to look at. And so if you're really encouraged, and the new American Academy of Pediatrics position statement, which I wrote on climatic heat stress, we made a big deal of that young athletes, especially young athletes, need to be encouraged to say something. Oftentimes they're afraid, especially the younger ones. They don't want to get someone in trouble. They don't want to make them look bad. They don't want to feel like a tattletale for the younger ones. But that goes up into older ages too. They need to be encouraged. The coach has to say, I want that information. And if you get that information, the coach has to respond to that information. And you can always put somebody back out there. If there's not a real problem, you can always put it back out there. But you can avert a lot of problems if you at least take a look at that person and see what's going on. If you don't, there's no do-over. Once it happens, now it's too late. So your other athletes can be a front line of defense that it can be very, very effective, especially, if they're playing the same position, the same location on the field and such, then they need to, hey coach, so-so doesn't look good. Take a look. And coaches need to emphasize that to your coaches. Respond to that. Okay? If there is a problem, first aid needs to be promptly addressed. Don't say, well, I know I'm kind of struggling there, but it's only 30 minutes left. Let's see how it goes. No. Save it for another day. Get the person, promptly attended to. If it gets really serious, and how do you go from maybe getting close to exertional heat exhaustion to exertional heat stroke? That threshold that you cross over, there begins to be such a change in body temperature and such a disruption of the brain that neuromuscular control, behavior, speech, all of those things begin to be compromised. And so a person may be starting to move around funny, they look weird, they might start talking gibberish. You might see an early sign of that by just even agitation or maybe saying things in an aggravated way. This is showing a central nervous system change. And if you see any of these weird behavioral problems or weird looking physical problems, that's an emergency right there. Chances are that person's either at or already having exertional heat stroke, and that person needs to be attended to immediately. EMS needs to be activated, and that person needs to be rapidly cooled. If you don't have the capacity to measure body temperature, cool that person anyway. It's not going to hurt. You should have some kind of ability, especially in outdoor hot conditions, some kind of ability to to dunk that person. We all know about the pools. They're very inexpensive. You have some ice. Even if you think, well, what if they're not overheated? You can save a life, and you're not going to hurt somebody by cooling them for 10 minutes, anyway. And even if you alert EMS, and even if the ambulance is on the way, cool the person anyway, immediately. Now, I've heard ambulance drivers get mad about that and don't let that person go until that person's cool, but the ambulance has no ability to cool somebody. And so oftentimes it's a long ride to the hospital. And oftentimes when you get to the hospital, there's not a way to immediately cool that person either right away. And so you're better off keeping that person on site. Hopefully there's an athletic trainer to help you with this, to keep that person on site and get that person cool. Especially if you have the ability to measure that temperature, the athletic trainer does, and it's determined that yes, indeed, the body temperature is hot. So, you have a question on that?
Yeah. Do you recommend that? I have a high school football program in Cleveland, Ohio, and it gets pretty hot and humid in August and around the lake and everything.
Yep.
Do you recommend that every program we should have a dunking pool or something?
Absolutely, without question. Everybody, yes, if you didn't hear the question, should we have the ability to rapidly cool somebody? If you are having kids in any sport or band, which is kind of a sport, out in hot conditions where there's a risk, any risk for exertional heat exhaustion or heat stroke, yes. It doesn't cost much. It's a plastic pool. It's filled with water, and you have some ice bags nearby that you can add on. It's a simple fix. And again, had those procedures been implemented with at least 40 deaths over the 20 years, those people probably would have lived. Okay, so yes, without question. Great question. Thank you for asking. Fundamental Summit. I think there's a session going on right now about emergency action plans right now, so for those of you obviously here, you're not hearing that. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I think you all should have that. There's a number of things here that need to be considered in an emergency action plan, and I think everybody here, I would hope, says, yeah, we have one. But what I want to ask you to make sure is done is that this emergency action plan isn't just something that's written, that's tucked away. This is something that everybody is aware of, from the athletes to the coaches to the administrators to the EMS people in town. It needs to be written with input from the community as well as the school as well as the coaches. And everybody needs to be on the same page. This needs to be practiced, and it needs to be practiced specific to each venue. So each venue knows who's responsible, where the equipment is, where the gate access is, what's the address, who's going to call, who's going to attend to the athlete, who's going to do what. It needs to be defined, it needs to be practiced, and it needs to be specific to the venue. Okay, one of the best presentations, if you ever get a chance to see, Ron Corson, head athletic trainer from University of Georgia, does this marvelous presentation. He travels around the country talking about this. It's a great presentation where, if you can imagine, a major university like that has many, many athletic venues. And all of them are well practiced. Everyone's in tune what to do. This is essential. And you need to have that emergency action plan for other things too. Not just environment problems, but security issues and all of that. But we're here today to talk about environment. But please, please, please have everybody familiar with it. It needs to be reviewed annually. It needs to be practiced annually. And it needs to be done coordinated between the coaches, the school, and the community, so that everyone's on the same page. Again, reading depositions of these deaths, the gate was locked. The ambulance didn't have the right access. They didn't know where you were. Could have saved a life. All right, so to my point before about, what do you do when? Is there a magic threshold? Is there a point that you don't have practice? And again, I can't truly answer that. And there is no magic threshold. What you see listed here are not all, but a number of the primary contributing risk factors that put the athletes at risk outdoors. Certainly the heat, humidity, if they're not prepared fitness-wise or hydration-wise or whatever that is. Sleep-wise, a lot of kids don't get enough sleep. Sleep has a big impact on tolerance to the heat, and all of these other things. So these are risk factors, just the uniform, just the number of sessions, the duration of sessions, the intensity of, all of these are contributing risk factors. And there's no one that weighs in over the other that much. All of these are factors. These are all things that need to be considered. Now, these are actions that can be done about it. And there's no one-to-one correlation here. It's not if this, then do this, if this, then do this. These are all, on the left, are all the factors that put the athletes at risk. And all of the things on the right are things that can be done to mitigate risk. Whatever the factor is on the left, things on the right can reduce the risk. So as you get more on the left, you need to do more on the right. Question here.
I coached football for many years. In football, you organize by position. And I coached quarterbacks, so I often work with quarterbacks and receivers and defensive backs in drill time that had low body mass. And you're rotating 3 quarterbacks and a bunch of receivers and a bunch of secondary. And then I would hear where the linemen were working out, a lot of hollering and stuff about not being as well conditioned. But we're talking with high body mass and lots of drills where it's exercising against resistance.
Right.
And so I've always wondered about the correlation between the heat problems and position and body mass and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. What about the association? And now's a good time to make that, because that's going to be certainly a risk factor. If you take a person who's very large and has a lot of body fat, and you work that person out really hard, and you mentioned resistance type activities, that really jacks up the body temperature a lot because of the muscle metabolism involved there. And so you take a heavy person who's less fit, working hard in a tough environment, great risk. However, don't dismiss the leaner, low body mass, more fit athletes, because and I'll show you some data in a little bit, we've measured that, and I've got to go a little faster, but we've measured that in fit football players and found that actually if you keep the workloads pretty high for everybody, the fit ones actually have the ability to produce more heat because they're more muscle and they work harder. So, but you're right, there is a direct correlation there. Another way to look at what we just said was, practice as planned on the left. If the number of factors that increase heat illness risk are low, you can pretty much go as planned. As you increase the factors, the risk increases. You see the practice as planned diminishes. So you need to do less as risk increases. Just sort of another visual way to look at that. NFHS isn't the only group that's put out papers. This is a ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine, consensus statement that I led back in, I think it was 2008, maybe before, might have been 2005, about football specifically, and a number of the things, everything we just mentioned here were identified back in that early statement. The National Athletic Trainers Association, which I was involved in as well, put out their preseason practice guidelines for all sports about this acclimatization period. These position statements are available, and the NATA certainly encourages this for all high school athletics, no matter if it's indoors or outdoors. And I just want to show you, I mentioned this high school that I worked with, and just a dramatic example of how it can happen. I was in Augusta, Georgia for 10 years, and this was a high school which is right next to the Medical College of Georgia, and we work very closely with this high school. And the coach is great. He's really receptive to the work we do with him, and really let us do a lot of things. And so this particular practice that we monitored the athletes' body temperature, they had 2 practices, 2 days in a row, in typical, deep south, hazy, hot, humid conditions. Brutal. Okay, temperatures in Celsius there, but you're talking about mid-90s and a very, very high humidity on both days. Hazy, hot, humid. We tracked body temperature in the players. And what you see on the graph there, and again, just safe to say, these are body temperatures on day 1 in the dark and day 2 here, through a 3-hour practice in these conditions, in full gear. In full gear, 3 hours. Body temperature was nothing. I mean, it was hardly anything. So the point here is that if you do things right, you can be in brutal conditions. If you're not overworking and you're taking sufficient number of breaks, I'm not to say to disregard the environment, but here's an example that we directly measured body temperature on back-to-back days in brutal conditions, in full gear. And these athletes were safe as far as body temperature was concerned because the practice was conducted appropriately. And so, again, you can do a lot. You don't have to not do anything. I've mentioned a lot about heat illness. I also want to say, as I said in the beginning, that if you keep a person safe in the heat, you also are minimizing the level of fatigue and overwork that is going to lead to other muscular problems, other sport-related problems and injuries too. So it's not just that you're minimizing the risk of heat illness and injury, there is a direct association with minimizing the risk of other types of injuries too. And so that's a good thing. And so, if you work somebody hard in the heat, or even if it's not in the heat, if you work that person too hard, they will fatigue and the muscle will break down and you can get all kinds of problems. But particularly in the heat, because of the fatigue factor, because of the way muscle metabolism works, if you overwork somebody, the potential for muscle breakdown, rhabdomyolysis leading to kidney problems is dramatically higher, as well as biomechanics and posture is better maintained and people aren't at funky positions and hurt ligaments and all of that. So it's exertional heat injury mitigation, but it's also other musculoskeletal injury mitigation too. So you're seeing a lot of changes. There's a good example on the top right there of a great dunk tank because it's deep with fans to cool as well. You're certainly seeing a lot of changes in football, but you're seeing changes in other sports too, which is a good thing. I talk to a lot of coaches in formats like this and athletic directors and such, and what's really encouraging is to hear the feedback that I get from coaches. Those coaches that are willing to implement a program like this, because there's always a concern. Should I do this? Should I believe what he just said? Sounds like he knows what he's talking about, but maybe he doesn't. The feedback I get is that if they do it, few, if any, heat-related problems. They just go away. And so that's a great thing. And, the point I just made, less time lost of all injuries, not only heat, but all musculoskeletal injuries were lower. So that's a good thing. The key thing is the coaches are saying, and we were still ready to play. So we did things completely differently, and I remember when our ACSM guidelines first came out, I had a coach in Missouri say, you know what, I'm going to try this. I'm going to believe everything they say and change the program. And after that preseason, said, wow, they perform better, we have no problems, and we're still ready. So I hear a lot of that. That's really good feedback. So it does work. The key points that I said today, if you can summarize everything we're talking about here, progressive acclimatization to the environment, to the intensity, to the uniform, to the duration, all of that's essential. You need to recognize that athletes don't fully appreciate how much fluid they lose and don't fully rehydrate between day to day. Hydration, we didn't mention too much about this, but not only can the fluid losses be high, but the electrolyte losses can be really, really high. The sodium losses can be extraordinary. If you have an athlete that's having cramping problems, probably, if it's not a fatigue-related cramp and it's a fluid loss, an electrolyte loss, an electrolyte deficit-related cramp, probably the sodium reintake needs to be addressed aggressively. And the biggest factor that puts people at great risk for all these problems is either multiple sessions on the same day or day-to-day sessions, so they don't fully recover between each practice or each competition. And again, monitoring, paying attention, planning ahead, knowing what your plan is in the heat is really, really essential. The High School Federation has a great free online course that was developed. I think I had a little bit of input into this. And if you haven't done that, your coaches haven't done that, then please, that's something to do. And if you have done it, it's always good to remind how, what the key points are. And I think I left just enough time for about 8 minutes of questions. So I wanted to kind of hurry through that so I could have some more feedback. Great questions already, but I'd sure like to take some more. Thank you.
I'd like to emphasize something you said at the end, and that is you were the major contributor in this course. There is a brochure in the back. I want to draw your attention to the outline of that course, which is clearly the presentation that Dr. Bergeron presented to us today, and most particularly to the resources that are in that course. So when your coaches register for that course, which is free, they have access to it for a full year, and they have access to the resources for a full year. So many of these things we've talked about, some of the position statements, information about wet valve and emergency care plans, sample plans, are all in this course, and it's free. And we hope it will always be free, but it's free because of a sponsorship that we have that is enabling us to provide that to you. So I want to thank Dr. Bergeron publicly for his major contribution to that course. It was, we have several states, I know New Jersey's here, they require all their coaches in all seasons to take that course, which I think is very proven.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate you saying that. Again, the information's here, guys. And NFHS has, just gone relentlessly to emphasize it's here. All of these problems can be mitigated if you really do this. And it's pretty simple. It's not that the hot conditions are benign. There still may be a problem. But I would say that if you follow the 7 fundamentals we outlined here and what's outlined in that course, if you do that, I would be shocked. If you really do it, I would be shocked if you had any sort of heat-related problem, any sort of serious heat-related problem. I just think that all of that. And, as I kept saying, you will find performance is enhanced. Athletes will feel better. They will perform better. So that's all good, right? Good. Yes?
I work with middle school athletes, so there is little to no understanding of proper preparation, hydration, certainly.
Yes.
So can you talk about pre-activity, post-activity, what the optimal, what they should be drinking, and also time, over the course of time and how much time?
You see, the question, if you didn't hear that, what about middle school and what about, specifics on what to do before, during, and after to help younger kids, nothing's different. Younger kids really need to follow the same thing, and coaches, anyone in charge of kids need to follow the same thing. There was I mentioned the American Academy of Pediatrics, their climatic heat stress, which is listed as a resource to you on this course. I wrote that climatic heat stress new position statement for the American Academy of Pediatrics. And it's really different than the previous one, because the previous one said that young kids, this population you're describing here, middle school and below, are at greater risk of exertional heat illness and lower tolerance than older kids are. And that's just not true. They actually can tolerate the conditions quite nicely. I've never seen a young child play him or herself to death. It's usually when there's an adult pushing that kid to do something that gets a young kid in trouble. So young kids, certainly 9, 10, 11, and 12 years old, can tolerate the heat just as well as an older adolescent or even adult, if not better, if all of these things are managed. But to your point, there's no real great answer in a short amount of time to that, except to say that you would be surprised how well a young person, as you're describing here, can tolerate conditions if that person is well rested, well nourished, and well hydrated. There's no magic about it. They're just regular meals and getting enough sleep and making sure that breakfast is there and lunch and that throughout the day you're not drinking Red Bull, but you're drinking water, juice, milk, whatever, and just have a good diet. And if you're coming in nourished and hydrated, it doesn't have to be overhydrated, and those kids certainly sweat less, and well rested, and everything that we outlined here about not overexerting, those kids will tolerate it quite a bit. And I've seen young kids in just tough conditions, my own kids included, manage 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours on a given day of intense activity in brutal conditions because everything else was managed. And so, again, it's the same advice. It's just the sweating loss is less, but it's really managed the same way.
Some of the documentation that you read does give recommendations at different heat index points.
Yeah.
And one of them is, over 105, no outdoor activity.
Well, over 105 no outdoor activity makes a little bit of sense because, you reach a point where if skin temperature is close to outdoor air temperature, or if outdoor air temperature is greater than skin temperature, then your body doesn't have a whole lot of ways to get rid of that heat. If it's dry enough, you can still sweat, and that sweat can still evaporate. So you might have to say, well, it's 105 degrees, but if it's a heat index like 115, 118, you're probably at a point which physiologists call uncompensable heat stress. There's no way to cool the body. The sweat won't evaporate because there's too much humidity. The air temperature is too high, so the radiative heat loss. And if there's no wind, then convection doesn't work either. But if the temperature is high enough and the humidity is low enough and there's a breeze and you're not working out too hard, you can tolerate 105 degrees. Again, I've seen
The
it.
105 heat indexes.
Yeah, 105 heat index, again, is dictated by temperature and humidity. So, it's probably close to that person
In Cleveland,
point.
that usually means 95 degrees and whatever.
Yeah, but again, I showed you, the data I showed you were just that. And you've got football players doing 3 hours in full gear in those conditions. And they were just fine because the intensity wasn't overdone. And the brakes were often, and they took the helmet off regularly. And so you can do a lot in tough conditions. Bring the intensity down, increase the frequency and duration of breaks, make it more instructive than intensity and conditioning, and you'll be surprised what you can accomplish. See that kid right there? When I tested this high school in Augusta, this is actually the coach's son, and this kid was out on the football field for those 3-hour practices every day. And he ran the plays, he ran the drills, he got in the huddles, he was out, he did the whole thing. He loved it. And it was fun. And because we weren't overworking him, here's a young boy that tolerated this you should have seen him. He's out there in the huddle, he claps, and beats up. Guys are running around, and I was all nervous that he's going to get hurt. But I'm not saying you're not cautious about that, but if it's fun and you're not overworking that person, a young boy like this can tolerate those conditions pretty nicely. Okay? You just have to accommodate. That's the main message here. Okay? I'm not saying don't, ignore the heat, don't. But you'd be surprised what you can do. There's an example of it. I think I am out of time. So I again want to applaud all of you for coming here. This is so, so important. And please take this message and bring it out to your schools. Thank you.